Hello, and thank you for joining us for the second part of our menopause series. In this episode, Dr. Mahek Sagan will shed light on the often overlooked psychological impacts of menopause, an aspect that remains largely unnoticed yet deeply significant. Dr. Sagan is a gender and reproductive health specialist with over a decade of experience. Today, she will speak about one of the lesser discussed but critically important discussions of menopause, mental health. This is a part of Masika Mahotsav, which is India's international period festival. Rooted in awareness, inclusivity, and cultural expression, the festival aims to break taboos, spark open conversations, and promote menstrual health and sustainability, bringing together communities, experts, and change makers. Masika Mahotsav creates a safe space to learn, share, and reframe the narrative around periods in India. Thank you, Doctor, for taking out time and providing information that will happen for the next approximately 45 to 55 minutes. Doctor, please go ahead. The platform is yours.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm going to quickly share my presentation. Once it's visible, please let me know. Are you able to see the presentation?
Yes, Doctor, it's visible.
All
Yes.
right. Okay. Shall I start?
Yes,
Yes.
Doctor, please go ahead.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for logging in today. I'm really glad to be part of this session, which is the second in the series organized under the Masika Mahotsav. And it's very encouraging to see platforms like this creating space for conversations that are really often overlooked. So, today I'm going to be speaking on menopause and mental health, a life course and equity lens, and we are going to talk about how different stages of menopause affect mental health. We invest so much in women's health right at the beginning of the life. But what really happens, in midlife? Why are we not according it due importance?
Ma'am, can we Hindi English mix?
श्योर श्योर
Thank
आई डू दैट मैं दोनों
thank.
करूंगी हाँ जी तो हम जब एक औरत का गर्भ होता है जब हम उसको इतना इम्पोर्टेंस देते हैं तो हम उसके मिड लाइफ में जब मेनोपॉज हो रहा है तब हम उसको इतनी इम्पोर्टेंस क्यों नहीं देते तो जब हम मेनोपॉज के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं तो हमारी कॉन्वर्सेशन बहुत लिमिटेड होती है जैसे फिजिकल सिम्टम्स जैसे कि लेट्स टॉक अबाउट फॉर एग्जांपल हॉट फ्लैशेस बट मेनोपॉज इज मच मोर देन दैट सो मैं कोशिश करूंगी कि आज मैं एक प्योरली मेडिकल भाषा में ना सही बट एक मेनोपॉज को एक ब्रॉडर लेंस के थ्रू हम देखें ताकि हम उसकी बायोलॉजी थोड़ा सा समझ पाए और उसके मेंटल हेल्थ पे हम थोड़ा सा आज प्रकाश डाल सकें जब हम मेनोपॉज की बात करते हैं तो मेनोपॉज में हम जब किसी से भी पूछते हैं कि अगर आपको मेनोपॉज है तो आपको कैसा फील होता है आपको क्या फील होता है तो फर्स्ट सिम्टम दैट कम्स अप टू अस इज हॉट फ्लैशेस सो हीट तो होती है हॉट फ्लैशेस तो होते हैं बट उसके पीछे के जो मेंटल एंड सोशल ट्रांजिशन हो रहा है वहां पे एक्चुअली मेनोपॉज का सारा कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी लाई करती है आज हम इनविजिबल सिम्टम्स को देखेंगे लास्ट सेशन में डॉक्टर नेहल ने पूरा मेनोपॉज के बारे में बहुत अच्छे से इंट्रोडक्शन दिया था हमें आज हम इनविजिबल सिम्टम्स के बारे में बात करेंगे विच इज मेंटल हेल्थ राइट सो बिफोर वी टॉक अबाउट मेंटल हेल्थ वी हैव टू actually understand what menopause is, which like I said we got an introduction last time but I'm going to very quickly do that again. सो इट्स एक सिंगल इवेंट नहीं है ये एक प्रोसेस है मेनोपॉज हमारा 3 स्टेजेस में होता है जो हमारा फर्स्ट स्टेज है उसको हम कहते हैं पेरीमेनोपॉज जो कि एक ट्रांजिशन फेज होता है ये लास्ट कर सकता है एनीवेयर फ्रॉम 4 to even 10 years तो इस टाइम में सबसे ज्यादा जो हमारे हार्मोन्स है जैसे कि मतलब 12 महीने अगर उसको पीरियड्स नहीं आए सो देन दैट phase is called as menopause. After that, we enter the postmenopause, which includes all the years beyond that point. Once the stoppage of periods or the menstrual cycle या मासिक धर्म रुक गया है, उसके बाद जो हमारे symptoms आते हैं या उसके बाद जो period होता है, उसको हम कहते हैं postmenopause. इसमें कुछ सिम्टम्स सेटल हो जाते हैं, बट हमारे कुछ न्यू हेल्थ कंसर्न बढ़ जाते हैं, जैसे बोन हेल्थ डिटोरिएट होने लगती है और हार्ट हेल्थ भी बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट हो जाती है। तो इन सब के नीचे एक हमारा ओवेरियन क्लॉक है। इस ओवेरियन क्लॉक में क्या है, हमारी एग क्वालिटी और क्वांटिटी का ड्रॉप हो रहा है, ईस्ट्रोजन हार्मोन का ड्रॉप हो रहा है, इसलिए हमारा ब्रेन, मूड, स्लीप एंड ओवरऑल वेलबींग जो है उसमें रेगुलेशन में प्रॉब्लम आती है। सो मेनोपॉज ना एक अब्रप्ट स्विच नहीं है कि हमने एक बॉडी में स्विच को ऑफ किया तो मेनोपॉज ऑफ हो गया, उसको ऑन किया तो पीरियड स्टार्ट हो गए, ऐसे नहीं होता है। सो मेनोपॉज अ जर्नी ऑफ 10 साल लगते हैं इन तीनों फेज में नेविगेट करने के लिए। तो जो चीज इतनी जरूरी है, विच इज लास्टिंग इन अ वुमेन्स बॉडी फॉर 15 years, a woman can have various stages of menopause for almost 15 years, so why are we not giving it that much importance? तो अगर हम बात करें कि सिर्फ मेनोपॉज को हम एक मेडिकल लेंस से देखेंगे तो हम एक वुमन को एंटायरली मिस कर देंगे। वी विल सी द हॉट फ्लैश, बट वी विल मिस that tiredness of a woman who's juggling a career also, a adolescent child maybe aging parents at her home, maybe lower socio-economic status। तो उसकी बॉडी पूरी न्यूरोलॉजिकल रीराइट कर रही है, उसका ब्रेन पूरा न्यूरोलॉजिकल रीराइट कर रहा है। तो हमें सिर्फ सिम्टम्स को नहीं ट्रीट करना, हमें उस पर्सन को, उस मेंसुरेटिंग पर्सन को जिसको मेनोपॉज हो रहा है, उसको सपोर्ट करना है। सो व्हेन वी टॉक अबाउट मेनोपॉज, द फोकस हमारा हमेशा बहुत नैरो होता है। हमारे वेजोमोटर सिम्टम्स के बारे में हम बात करते हैं। वेजोमोटर सिम्टम्स क्या हो गए, जैसे कि हमारा नाइट स्वेट्स होना, रात में सोते सोते बहुत पसीना आ जाना, हॉट फ्लैशेस होना। अगर एसी भी चल रहा है तो एक मेनोपॉजल पर्सन को गर्मी लग सकती है, इवन दो वो एसी फुल ब्लास्ट पे ऑन है। तो इसलिए मेनोपॉज को हम 3 लेंस से देखते हैं, जिसको कहते हैं बायो साइको सोशल लेंस। बायो में हम कहते हैं कि हार्मोनल शिफ्ट्स हो रहे हैं, फिजिकल चेंजेस हो रहे हैं बॉडी में।
I'm sorry, doctor.
साइकोलॉजिकल, यस,
I'm sorry to interrupt. For the interest of our international partners, could you please keep majority in English?
I'm okay to speak in English as well and in Hindi as well. Just let me know how we want to take it forward.
Yeah. If you can keep at least like 70% in English.
Sure, that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So when we talk about the biopsychosocial lens, which means that we are looking at menopause from a biological, psychological, and social dimensions together. Biologically, yes, there are hormonal shifts, there are physical changes happening in the body, but psychologically, this phase is affecting a woman's sense of identity, her mood, her confidence, and how she sees herself. Especially in societies where youth and fertility are so valued, especially in a developing country where we talk about fertility, where we talk about a woman's reproductive entire cycle, and we say that her worth in our society is limited to whether she can produce children or not, whether she can carry on the next generation or not. So especially amongst all this, stopping of her periods and entering into menopause is not easy. So many women are navigating these intense pressures. Right now, when we talk about this, and the physical load is already very high. So what is it? Now we have the social taboo of aging, the social taboo of loss of fertility, which is preventing women from seeking help, which is leading to a very silent struggle. So we have to reframe the narrative, and we have to challenge the idea that menopause is obviously not a decline. Instead, it is a period of significant biological adaptation, and that will require a lot of holistic support system. And it will not just require a medical prescription, because the medical prescription will only treat your physical symptoms. What about your psychological symptoms? How are we going to handle that? So when we talk about this, and now we've already discussed how the different stages of menopause are. So why is this important? Because menopause is affecting all women and trans men, but not equally. Because there is a reality. The reality is that the biological transition is not universal. This experience is dictated by factors such as power, safety, socioeconomic condition. A person living in a suburban area might not have the same challenges navigating menopause as a person who is staying in a lower socioeconomic setting. Midlife women, for example, who are at the center of sandwich generation. What is sandwich generation? That they are balancing their caregiving for children, even though they're looking after their elderly parents, and they're also navigating workforce. So this is despite all this, the menopausal person is largely invisible within the health system. So most health system that we have currently, they are prioritizing our maternal and child health, which is leaving a gap for women between 45 to 60 years. Now many of these women between the 45 to 60 years are dismissed by the healthcare providers as simply getting older rather than having a legitimate health conditions. So in lower resource settings, this gap becomes even more pronounced. Now menopause is not treated as a health issue, it is something that women are expected to endure. It's okay, it happens like this. You are, I mean, that's just how it is, so you have to deal with it. So with limited access to treatments like hormone therapy or mental health care, many are relying on very informal support systems that are not adequate at all. So it is also important to recognize that menopause is not only experienced by cisgender women, but it also experienced by trans men. Individuals who are assigned female at birth may also go through menopause, either naturally or maybe because of some medical transition. So the physical symptoms of menopause might remain the same, but the psychological experiences are different for both. Menopause related body changes can intensify the gender dysphoria there. So it will make the experience even more distressing. At the same time, trans men often face additional barriers in accessing care, including stigma and lack of provider access. uh, yeah. So I have some stats here on my screen. Menopause is in India is not just an health event, it is a social one, because Indian women reach menopause nearly 5 years earlier than the Western women. They're often navigating peak caregiving and professional responsibilities while simultaneously managing high rates of undiagnosed anxiety. So we have to move from hiding it to supporting it. As you can see, that the average age is 46.2 years for Indian women, which means the economic exit can happen 5 years earlier than the West. And there is a lot of information gap. Only 70.2% of women in low resource settings have zero clinical awareness of menopause. So they have absolutely no idea what menopause is. And 81.2% of perimenopausal women are experiencing anxiety. 67.4 women who are unskilled workers, they are reporting severe decline in work-life quality. Now, this is important because the 67.4 women are working maybe as laborers, and daily wages are extremely important to them. So even if they're not going to work for one day, that is a significant loss of pay for them. So we're going to talk about the stage 1, which is the perimenopause. Now, this is the stage where you will hear quite often a woman telling you, I don't feel like myself anymore. This is often the state that they are describing. If a woman in her perimenopausal years is saying sentences like, I don't feel like myself anymore, I don't know what has happened to me. So most probably they are in stage 1 of menopause, which is called as the perimenopause. Now this perimenopause is often the most psychologically intense phase of the menopause transition. Now the key reason is not just because the estrogen levels have dropped, but because they are fluctuating unpredictably. A month they will drop, the next month they might rise again. And this is the key reason that the brain chemicals such as serotonin and dopamine, which is helping our body, which is making us happy or sad. So serotonin and dopamine are two chemicals which guide whether we are happy on a particular day or we are sad on a particular day. they influence our mood, they influence our motivation, they influence our even emotional stability. So because estrogen levels are fluctuating, so on our serotonin and dopamine are also fluctuating. So they're rising and falling, which is why a lot of women report symptoms like increased irritability, difficulty in concentrating. They say brain fog. I have a brain fog. You know what is this brain fog? This brain fog is that the woman or the person who's entering menopause is having difficulty in concentrating. Now, this can also have a very early onset of depression or a heightened anxiety, and even if they have never experienced these before. Now, I need to highlight here that there is also an important layer here, which is connecting to past trauma. Now, for women who have experienced gender based violence, stage 1 of menopause, that is perimenopause, can feel particularly very destabilizing. You know why? Because the unpredictability of their own body can actually mirror past experiences, where when they underwent gender based violence, they lost control of their own body. They could not control their own body, and sometimes that triggers the same response in the body. For trans men, these hormonal fluctuations can also occur, and they may interact with gender dysphoria, making emotional distress even more complex. Now, when we talk about stage 2 of menopause, which is the point of convergence. Now, once stage 1 has been navigated, now stage 1 can last anywhere from 4 years to 10 years. So when the person has entered stage 2, which is the menopause stage, the point of convergence. Now, here means that the person has gone full 12 months without any period. Now, this is the bridge between fluctuation and the new normal. So, the physical symptoms here, like night sweats and insomnia, will peak. Chronic sleep deprivation is a major driver of menopausal distress. And one of the most important thing to understand here is that because of disruption, you have a domino like effect. Now, what is a domino like effect? That loss of sleep will lead to menopausal distress. Menopausal distress will lead to even more heightened anxiety and irritability, and being that feeling of being overwhelmed. And this can sometimes resemble clinical depression as well. So and at the same time, this stage also carries a very strong identity component. Now, in many cultural contexts, including our own country, India, menopause is seen as a very social milestone. So the end of fertility can trigger complex emotions, ranging from relief for some women to a grief or a sense of loss for others. It can also coincide with broader life transitions. So menopause generally coincides with broader life transitions, such as children growing up. So you have the empty nest syndrome there, or shifting in the family role, which can even contribute to something called as a midlife crisis. So this stage, that is the stage 2, which is menopause, is not just about reaching a biological marker. It's about navigating your own self, which is both physically as well as both socially. Now, when we move to the stage 3, which is post menopause, now this is the hormonal picture here. It becomes a little bit more stable. Now, estrogen levels have remained consistently low, which means the intense ups and downs that we were seeing in the stage 1 and the stage 2, the roller coaster of perimenopause, has usually settled down. So as a result, many women will notice that their severe mood swings, irritability, or even anger that they were experiencing earlier, that has begun to reduce. Now the brain has also started to adapt to this new hormonal baseline. But this does not mean that the challenges have disappeared. Now the challenges have shifted. Now the shift is that in earlier stages it was about our mood, but now in stage 3 the challenge is for our cognition. Many women become aware of the memory lapses or slower recall, so which obviously leads to an heightened anxiety about aging or independence, and even fears around conditions like dementia. But this stage is not only about challenge, it can also be about a period of transformation. From a very social perspective, many women will describe this phase as a kind of freedom from monthly cycles, freedom from reproductive expectations, and in some cases, from long standing social pressures. So, some women have even described this as a second spring, like, it's a time which is marked by increased confidence, self awareness, and a stronger sense of their own self advocacy. So postmenopause is not just an endpoint, but it can also be a phase of understanding your body. You have already adjusted to the low estrogen levels in your body, and now you have a renewed agency towards your body. So when we talk about mapping menopausal mental health, so we map it as per these three categories. The first is that, because in India, mental health symptoms are often, in fact, not only in India, across the world, the first mental health symptoms are often very somatized. You will never say, or a woman will never say that I am depressed. She will say, I'm having body aches, I'm having burning sensations, I'm feeling very heavy headed today, I'm having a bad headache. I don't know, I just don't feel good today. I could not sleep the whole night. Maybe my whole body feels as if it has zero energy. So they will somatize your mental health symptoms, because just saying that, I have depression, or I have anxiety issues, or I have a mental health symptom, still is not very widely accepted. So what we do, we always somatize, we always say whatever we are feeling mentally, we always try to relate it to a physical discomfort. So it is crucial for professionals and community mobilizers and people who are working in the field of public health, especially around menopausal women, to look behind the physical complaint, and you have to find out the emotional root problem of it. So when a woman is always saying, or a person who's in perimenopause is saying that I feel depressed, or I constantly have body aches, or there is a burning sensation, so you have to understand that, there might be some emotional component to it. So the three categories where we map the menopausal mental health are your mood and emotional regulation, which is the hormonal roller coaster, the cognitive symptoms, which is the brain fog cluster, and then you have your sleep and somatic psychological symptoms, which is also called as the domino effect. So we're going to take these one by one. So when we talk about the mood and emotional regulation, which is the hormonal roller coaster, now these symptoms are directly tied to the drop in estrogen. Now, our body's estrogen hormone has a very neuroprotective effects on serotonin and dopamine. Serotonin and dopamine are the two chemicals which affect our mood and our mind. So, whenever the estrogen levels are normalized in our body, it acts as a very protective mechanism towards our happy hormones. The minute these estrogen levels go down during menopause, our happy hormones are going haywire. So that's exactly why our mood starts to get affected, and irritability and menopausal rage happens. What is menopausal rage? You will have a sudden intense burst of anger that feels so disproportionate to the situation. It might be a very small situation, but the reaction was so intense that the person gave such an intense reaction that nobody could understand that why so much of irritability and why so much of rage are you showing for such a small situation. So that is because the estrogen is gone down. So nobody is protecting our serotonin and dopamine. So that's exactly why we are feeling what we are feeling. And then after that, what happens is, because we react so much on such a small thing, then anxiety and panic set in. New onset health anxiety, or a generalized sense of dread, which is often accompanied by heart palpitations. Now, because menopausal age is again around 40 to 50 years, it is the same age in which majority of the cardiovascular symptoms also start to appear. So, when a person says that they're having heart palpitations, now, so if you see that, the first thing that you will kind of take away from that is that you might have a heart issue. So you will go to the doctor, a cardiologist maybe, or a physician maybe, get your blood work done, get your heart checkups done, get your echo, get your ECG, and everything will come back to normal. But still you will feel this generalized sense of dread and constant heart palpitations. So what is that? That is because of this hormonal roller coaster ride that is going on in the body. And then you have depressive symptoms. You will have feelings of sadness, hopelessness, or a loss of interest in activities, which is clinically also called as anhedonia. Then you have emotional ability. So frequent tearfulness or rapid mood crashes without any external trigger. So this entire thing that I just explained comes under the first stage of your menopausal mental health symptoms, that is your mood and emotional regulation. Then comes the brain fog cluster, which is the cognitive symptoms. Now, these symptoms will cause the most distress in a professional setting, because if you cannot remember stuff, if you cannot do your work properly, and you're constantly having forgetfulness, so you will have loss of confidence. You will not be able to perform very well at your workplace. You will have memory lapses. You will keep forgetting names. One can forget appointments. One can even forget at times why one entered a room. So and again, clinically, because again the menopausal period is from 40 to 50 years, this can again be mistaken for early onset dementia. Then you can have difficulty concentrating, that fuzzy feeling in your head which makes complex tasks or even decision making very overwhelming. So I've seen women who are in the age of 40 to 50 years saying, going to a bank makes me very overwhelmed. I don't like the paperwork. I don't like giving the responsibility of handling complex tasks. That makes me very I get anxious about it. Then you'll also find word finding difficulties, that tip of the tongue syndrome, that you could not even recall the common words and they become very hard to recall during talking to somebody. And sometimes that becomes embarrassing, that when you're talking to somebody and you just knew that word or you just knew that person's name, but you're not able to recall anymore now. Then comes your third stage, which is the sleep and the somatic psychological symptoms. Now, insomnia and sleep fragmentation. Waking up frequently because of night sweats, which lead to chronic fatigue, which is the primary driver of depression. Now, when that happens, you're waking up very frequently during the night because of your sweating. In the morning, you will have chronic fatigue. And then what happens if this continues for many months and even years? Then that is the primary driver for depression. Women will feel loss of libido, a decrease in sexual desire, which can definitely lead to sometimes relationship strain, guilt, and a further decline in your mental well being. So this body has become so much sensitized, your neurological symptom has so much become so much sensitized that sometimes it can even lead to sensitivity to noise, touch, light, and often making the environment feel very overstimulating. So you will hear women saying like, please do not touch me, please do not talk to me, I need a quiet room right now, I'm overstimulated, I'm overwhelmed, I don't need anybody speaking to me. You will see the women who are in this stage often declining social events, often saying no to socializing, because their body is in such an override, because their hormones is in such an override, that they have become so sensitized to like every these kind of environment makes it very overstimulating for them. So what are the red flags? Now, if somebody is going through this, so when do we seek immediate help? Because women are 3 times more likely to experience a depressive episode during the perimenopausal transition compared to their premenopausal years. So, perimenopause is not just a phase of discomfort, it is obviously, that means, a period of significant increased mental health risk. Now, this increase is driven by a combination of hormonal fluctuations, sleep disruptions, and also your psychosocial stressors. So many of these symptoms that I just described to you in my previous slides are often dismissed as just menopause. It's okay, you might be undergoing menopause. So that's what it is, that they can delay proper diagnosis and care. Now, when these symptoms become persistent, they become intense, or they begin to interfere with daily functioning, they have to be taken seriously, because timely identification is important. Appropriate medical or psychological support is extremely important, because it can make a lot of difference in the outcome. So what can be the red flags? A woman or a person who is undergoing menopause is having persistent sadness lasting for more than 2 weeks, loss of interest in daily activities, not 1 day, not 2 days, but for more than 2 weeks. You do not like doing anything at all. So, none of the daily activities that you like doing previously, you do not like anymore. You do not like going to work, or maybe you do not like spending time with your family, kids, friends, or maybe are not taking interest in your job anymore. Severe anxiety or panic attacks, constant anxiety. The nervous system is in constant overdrive, that there is this constant anxiety all the time, and there is this panic attack that sets in. You have sleep disturbance, which is affecting your daily functioning, because it is not possible to function without sleeping proper. So if every night you're not able to sleep, one is not able to sleep properly, it is going to affect the daily functioning, and that is going to affect in turn making difficult to concentrate on making decisions, and that will again perpetuate what feelings of hopelessness or worthlessness. So, thoughts of self harm or suicide is an urgent red flag. One has to seek immediate help for that. So, we've spoken a lot about symptoms. Now, symptoms are what? Symptoms are what the woman or the person who's undergoing menopause will describe. But clinically, what are the mental health risks during menopause? What, as a professional, one has to look out for? So, a person can have depression or pseudo dementia. Now, what this is, that this is, like I said, that the menopausal age is 40 to 55 years. This is again the same age bracket where a majority of cardiovascular problems arise, where a lot of neurological problems arise, especially dementia, early onset of dementia. So, a menopause related depression and pseudo dementia is often misdiagnosed as clinical dementia, right? One has anhedonia. I just explained that anhedonia means a person has loss of interest in almost everything, right? Um, and panic disorder appears. Now, what is a panic disorder? So clinically, the panic disorder will appear as palpitation, uh, and it is obviously again very frequently misdiagnosed as a cardiac issue. So there is a triple burden, and there will be a burnout. What is a triple burden? The first would be insomnia, and the person is in chronic fatigue, sorry, insomnia and fatigue, self medication, and escapism. Now, this is the stage where a person sometimes steps into self medicating. Now, self medicating can be as minor as maybe treating the somatic symptoms that you're feeling. If a person is having headache, maybe the person may prescribe uh, a medicine to cure that. Or a person feels that, taking sedatives or alcohol helps me sleep properly. So, a person may start doing that regularly. So, this is again that triple burden or the burnout. So, clinically, one has to seek out a professional, and one has to list out the symptoms that they are feeling, so that can be taken care of by a professional. And as a professional, or as as a society or a community, we have to stop asking all the time that, why are you so moody, and start asking questions like, are you feeling safe, are you feeling supported? A clinical condition during menopause is very rarely just about the hormones. It is your body's reaction to your stress that you are accumulating in the body. Now, this becomes even more challenging in low resource settings. Why? Because these are the silent thieves of a woman's productivity. Nobody is going to ask a woman in a low resource setting, why are you so moody? Why are you not feeling well? Do you need any help? Because she is just expected to buckle up and face everything that is happening to her and continue doing her responsibilities. So again, like I just gave you a brief about how the gender based trauma affects and heightens the menopausal effects, because there is a invisible connection between gender based violence and mental health during menopause. Now, one of the key mechanisms that we have here is what we call is the somatic trigger, because like I just listed out a lot of physical symptoms of menopause like palpitations, night sweats, and shortness of breath. Now they can very closely resemble the body's stress response during trauma, when the person was undergoing gender based violence. So for women with history of violence or chronic abuse, these symptoms may not feel harmless. Instead, they can trigger your body's memory of that particular trauma, leading to a lot of flashbacks, panic attacks, night terrors, and even overwhelming distress. So that is because long term exposure to gender based violence will always keep the nervous system of that woman in a hyper alertness mode. So during perimenopause, which we discussed that is a roller coaster ride of hormones, when the estrogen levels are fluctuating and the brain is not being protected by estrogen anymore. So what has happened is that our body's hyper alertness because of our previous trauma has become even more vulnerable now to depression and anxiety. So this becomes extremely important. So menopause related changes will also conflict with gender identity. Not only the hormones, but as well as identity. So the menopause related changes may feel very misaligned with the person's gender identity, which can increase distress and also intensify gender dysphoria. So similar to other groups, here also physical symptoms will be like this, almost the same. One can have palpitations, one can have night sweats, they can have anxiety, they can have emotional discomfort. But here you will also have an additional layer in the trans men due to stigma, discrimination, or lack of social acceptance. So this will make them even more vulnerable to mental health challenges. So accessing care will also be extremely difficult here because of the social stigma. And our healthcare systems, many healthcare systems, they are not fully equipped to provide gender positive affirming menopausal care. And so the fear of stigma and misgendering may lead individuals to avoid seeking help altogether. So there is a support gap here. There is both in terms of mental health services and also in terms of community support. So the biological process and the feelings of menopausal symptoms are same in both, but the experience can be shaped by their identity, their social context, and how they have access to your inclusive care. Now, equity gap is important to discuss here because when we talk about menopause, we have to talk about people from all the social paradigms. We're not only talking about the suburban area, we're also talking about areas where you have low resource income settings. So you have informal sector, and our healthcare system is always prioritizing maternal and child healthcare, right? So the post fertility period that we say, that the menopausal period is not that funded properly, especially the most public health funding that we have. It is especially in the low resource settings, that is funneled into what? That is funneled into maternal and child health. So once a woman has passed her reproductive age, her mental and hormonal health often drops off the priority list. And also there is a lot of cultural normalization of suffering. This is often the social expectation from a woman, that you have to endure this phase. It's a rite of passage. So everybody went through it, I went through it, my mother went through it, my grandmother went through it. So this cultural normalization of suffering will not let a person take early intervention for clinical depression, because they will feel that this is my personal failure, that I was not able to cope up, because My mother coped up. My mother did not need any medical intervention. My grandmother did not need any medical intervention. Nobody around me needs any medical intervention. So why do I, undergoing menopause, need a medical intervention? Why do I need that? So we have to stop viewing this as a personal failure, and we have to start viewing this as a medical transition. So you have a lot of structural barriers to now. I said that we have to, like in my previous slide, I ended with saying that, you know, we have to take access to our like medical intervention. We have to go and seek support. But we have so many barriers to healthcare access. Like I said, the maternal health barrier. Our community spending is often on maternal and child health. And the once a woman is past her childbearing age, the primary healthcare center loop, she's out of that loop. So menopausal symptoms are not treated. You have geographical and economic distance as a barrier, because you know you have there's a physical distance from clinics and hidden cost of travel. You have lack of specialized training. There is a mental health oversight. It's not discussed in mental, like I was telling you, that we do not discuss mental health in psychological terms. We always talk about mental health with somatic terms like burning feet, heavy head, whole body is paining. So ineffective physical treatments for emotional roots happen. Then we have our health system gaps. Now, what do we have? We do not have menopausal healthcare integrated in the primary care. We have a lot of lack of trained providers, and we also have a lot of your limited mental health services. So there is lack of trained providers. You have many healthcare professionals who are not trained, and mental health services are limited, especially again in low resource settings. Even when a woman recognizes that she needs help, because of the community support system, because of the public health professionals who are working, still the access will remain a major barrier. So this is a systemic level gap, and awareness, trainings, and services all become insufficient if we do not have the services to give it to them. So then we talk about, you know, our coping mechanisms. Now, especially in low resource settings, women are already coping with menopause, often without any formal support. One of the most common strategies, is peer conversation. Women share experiences informally with friends, neighbors, or family members. These spaces, when they're sharing these, they provide validation, even if this is not in structured form of support. So they will discuss some traditional practices, maybe they will discuss some home remedies, they will talk about some cultural rituals, they will also talk about some local customs and understood ways of managing systems. So same time, many women are relying on endurance. Like I said, that, you know, it is a rite of passage. That's what they feel, that, you know, one has to undergo this. It's okay. So symptoms are tolerated instead of being treated, because there are very limited alternatives. And underlying all of this is normalization. It's just natural part of aging, something they have to accept. So these coping mechanisms that I'm just telling you about, they can obviously provide some level of support, but they're reflecting a major gap where women are managing significant physical and mental health challenges without any adequate medical or psychological care. So the question is not whether the women are coping. They of course are, they're doing whatever they can in their own small way, but the question is whether they are being adequately supported by the community. So you have a lot of low cost strategies that one can do. So, you know, you have where we can support a woman's mental health during menopause, especially in settings where access to formal care is very limited. So first is community groups can play a very powerful role. So whether it is through self-help groups or informal women's network, these spaces will definitely provide the emotional support. They will do the shared learning practices, and they will give you a sense of not being alone. Second, one has to develop a self-based routine care. Simple, consistent habits like, you know, maintaining a sleep schedule, waking up on time, going to bed on time, and setting aside small moments of rest for throughout the day, especially one who is navigating perimenopause. Now, once we set aside small moments of rest for ourselves, we can help stabilize our physical as well as our mental well-being. Now, nutrition becomes another key factor. Even when limited resources, focusing on balanced, locally available food, not going into the trends, not giving into what is available coming into our country from outside. Locally available foods will support energy levels, mood, as well as the overall health. And physical activity is extremely important during this phase. Even light regular movements such as a small walk can significantly improve mood, reduce anxiety, and support better sleep. So the key point here to make is that, effective support does not require a lot of expensive interventions. Small, consistent, community based strategies can actually make a very meaningful difference here. So now when we say policy call to action, how can we do that? How can we integrate mental health into menopause? Because menopause is not currently fully integrated as a standalone dedicated component of India's national health policy. Though we do have a lot of recent developments and very positive developments, which are indicating that a significant shift is, we are shifting towards acknowledging it. So we have to integrate menopausal mental health into national health programs. We have to include menopausal care within existing reproductive and primary healthcare frameworks, and we have to expand our focus beyond the maternal health. We have to include the midlife women, that is from 45 to 60 years, and we have to develop some guidelines on menopausal management, including your mental health. So I was just talking about that how some shifts have happened. So Maharashtra launched India's first state-run menopausal clinics in January 2026 across government hospitals to provide a comprehensive care. In Kerala followed this suit with plans to announce in the 2026 budget to establish a specialized menopausal clinic, which is also even supported by a grant money of 3 crores. The Indian Menopause Society and other experts have been pushing for the start at 35, screen at 40 approach, which is urging the policymakers to include your menopausal related care in the national health mission. And we have to strengthen our primary healthcare system, because this is the first point of contact for our women in the low resource settings. This is the first place where women will seek care. So we have to train our frontline health workers such as ASHAs, ANMs, and primary care doctors, because they are obviously the first point of contact. They will provide your basic counseling, and importantly, they will guide women towards appropriate referrals when needed. So if they find any red flags that we were talking about, they will give them appropriate referrals. Another critical intervention is routine screening. So if we begin screening midlife women for depression and anxiety as part of regular health checkups, we can move from a reactive and treatment based care to a very early detection and prevention. So this shifts the system from waiting for the symptoms to become severe and appear to identifying them and addressing them very early on. Now, one of the most critical steps is accessing the expanding the access to our mental health services. We need to integrate the mental health services, like I said, into primary care. We have to provide low cost or free counseling services, and we can obviously use the telehealth and digital platforms to reach the undeserved care. Uh, Equity and inclusion is extremely important whenever we talk about designing intervention. Yes, women are like, we talk about them when we talk about our designing an intervention, but we have to also acknowledge the fact that different groups will face very different barriers to accessing care. For women in low resource settings, the biggest challenge would be distance, cost, and limited decision making power. Because for a woman who is in a low resource setting does not have autonomy over her own body, she cannot decide whether she needs to go for a menopausal intervention or not. So solutions that we make for them need to go closer to them. They have to be through the community health workers, they have to be through mobile clinics, they have to be through your affordable services. Now, another group is for survivors of gender based violence. The priorities first is safety and trust. Services have to be confidential, they have to be trauma informed, and they have to be integrated. So survivors are not navigating, multiple systems when they're already in distress. And for gender diverse populations, like, including trans men, they're often completely excluded from the traditional system. So many avoid care because of stigma, misgendering, or lack of provider access. So we need to again actively design inclusive and gender affirming services and not just assume neutrality. Workplace reforms have to happen. You have to have flexible working arrangements, mental health support, and awareness programs by your employers. Public awareness and your education campaign, we have to normalize it. We have to normalize conversations like what we are doing today. We are normalizing the conversations around menopause and mental health. We are using mass media and community platforms, and we are also using culturally appropriate IAC materials to actually spread information. We have to invest in data and research, because this is a major gap that we face when we talk about evidence, because we do not have enough evidence where we are linking menopause to its mental health, and that has to prioritize some funding and context specific research. So, we come to the end, and I would like to bring us back to the central idea of this presentation, which was that menopause is not just a biological event, it's a deeply mental, social, and structural experience. Of course, it's universal, it is experienced, but it is not experienced equally. A woman's experience is shaped by her access to care, her social environment, her economic situation, and her life history, which can also include trauma. So, what we've seen is that silence is there, stigma is there, gaps are there in our healthcare system. And often it should be a very natural transition. How it's a natural transition from a pre-pubertal stage to a pubertal stage, the same natural transition has to happen from the pre-menopausal period to the menopausal period. But coping should not be an expectation that we just put in on the woman. We should not be using terms like it's okay, it happens to everybody. You have to understand that support has to come in. We have to also understand that the menopause is not just physical symptoms, it is also the mental health that is getting affected. So, are our systems ready to recognize it, to respond to it, and are we supporting people who are undergoing menopause through it? Because if we are ignoring this stage of life, we are ignoring a very significant part of women's health, right? We're not giving them due accordance to their dignity and their well-being, because menopause is inevitable for every menstruator out there, but suffering it should not be there, right? So it's time that we move from awareness to action to support systems. This was just a case study which I will not be taking because we don't have that much time. Thank you so much for listening to me today, and please feel free to ask me any questions if you have. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doctor. Great. I already see people have started sharing their thoughts and questions in the chat section, and I'm quickly going to check it out. Dr. Radha Mishra, she has a question to you, and I guess she's asking, can menopause start before 45 years of age?
Am I visible and audible? Because I
Yes,
think,
yes, you are.
yeah.
Yes, doctor. You're visible and both audible.
Yes, okay. Yes, menopause can definitely start before 45, but that is way early. I mean, the menopausal age that is expected to start is from around in 45 to 55 years. Early menopause can be before 45, and you can even have some premature menopause. Now, premature menopause, can happen because sometimes, I think last time also Dr. Nehal was discussing this, that sometimes because somebody has to undergo hysterectomy at a very early age. So if somebody has underwent hysterectomy, that person can start menopause even at 30 years or 35 years. So genetics play a very important factor especially in menopause. Some autoimmune conditions will happen, like somebody who's undergoing chemotherapy, radiation therapy, that might induce some early onset of menopause. Hysterectomy, like I said, oophorectomy, if somebody has underwent. Premature menopause is generally that happens before the age of 40. early menopause is what we say is before the age of 45, and normal menopause, I mean the average age, not the normal, sorry, the average menopausal age is from 45 to 55 years.
I guess Anamika Sharma also has a question. Anamika, please turn on your camera and ask the question.
Hello, hi. Actually, I have a very bad connectivity, so I think it will be better if my
No
camera is
problem,
off.
Anamika. You can go ahead
Yeah,
and ask the
okay.
question. No problem.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for a wonderful session. It was very interesting, but it was all interesting. And the most interesting part for me was, like you said, how community-based organizations like women group and SHG groups could help tackle or even have
Yeah.
conversations around menopause and how it is related to mental health, to have conversations around that.
Hmm.
I think that is a very good intersections within the community to have a conversation or even to start talking about menopause in the community. So I wanted to ask if there is any, examples, if you have done such type of conversations or any success stories, and how it has materialized in your experience. How was your experience? Have you done that? If we could able to, if we could be able to get some ideas, how should we go about? I think that would be really helpful, and I wanted to know about that actually. Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. Actually, the case study that I had, which I did not uh, like I thought we don't have that much time, so yeah, I'm going to very quickly talk about that. We had around a 48-year-old woman from a semi-urban community, and during our routine conversations around menopause, so we kind of through shared experiences, like I said, that sometimes these women are already talking about them, but very informally and not in a very structured way. So we kind of got to them together, and it was a kind of a focus group discussion, and then we had some pointers, and we had some kind of topics that we wanted to discuss with them, and we encouraged them to talk about their experiences. So this, a majority of them said that we have sleep disturbances, and we have irritability and fatigue. And so there was this woman who said that my family is saying that this is very normal part of aging. So you are becoming older, that's exactly why you're having whatever you're having. And so she really wanted to go in for a medical or an emotional support group, but because, like I said, that women do not have autonomy towards their over their decisions. So but then, because of our routine sessions, she joined the local women's group, and it was a community based program. They all began to share their experiences and their learnings about menopause, and after, few months, they reported improved mood. They had better coping mechanisms because they did not feel isolated. I think what women generally, once you get to know that I'm not alone feeling, that safe space once you create, and where you're able to share your experiences openly, and you're able to normalize. I think the most important thing is to not feel alone, not feel isolated, and normalize whatever you're feeling. If somebody just tells you and talks to you that whatever you're feeling is absolutely okay, that validates what you're feeling. So yeah, so we do these sessions, and we've seen that just having these community self-help groups, and even having their own support system, sometimes you don't even need to intervene. They will be talking amongst themselves, and they'll give each other some kind of techniques to calm themselves down. Like I mean, we had an incident. I'm not going to take much time, but very quickly talk to you about it. It's a very funny incident that during one of the meet, one woman said that off late my spouse is really irritating me. Everything that he's saying is irritating me. So the other one says that I have stopped listening to my spouse anymore. He also does the same to me. I'm saying, okay, whatever you're saying, I'm just listening, and I'm not going to react to it. So that was so candid, that what they shared. So kind of everybody laughed, and they said, oh yeah, I mean, that makes sense, because if we stop reacting to whatever everybody is saying, that's in our own hand. So that gave them some kind of an autonomy, that we have the power to not react to whatever the other person is saying. It kind of helps. Yeah, I hope I could clarify that.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much. I think, yes, I think going, talking to SHGs and talking to community-based organizations, while we going to the community, if we start talking to them, I think this will be very helpful. And yes, I think it did help me. Thank you very much. The answer.
Doctor, we have another question from Ami Yagnik. Her question is, should such conversation be among only women?
Okay. Yes, that's a very valid question. And, so actually, that depends on what purpose of your conversation is. So you can have mixed groups and you can also have women only spaces. But I feel that the best approach is always a combination, because sometimes you do need only women spaces where they feel safe and they feel that nobody's judging them and you're easily able to share your personal experiences, especially where menopause is not that openly discussed. But that being said, if your goal of your session is broader awareness and support, and you want to include, then you should be including partners, you should be including family members, you should even be including workplace managers, sometimes often men, to understand what menopause related challenges are. Like, because so that obviously depends upon what is your outcome of your session. Do you want the woman to feel safe and share her concerns, so that she is not stigmatized or there is no judgment, or your goal is broader awareness and support system? So if your goal is broader awareness and you want to include and you want to work on building empathy, and you want to work on reducing the stigma at home or at work, and you want to improve the support system that they have, so yeah, so then you have to include the partners, the family members, and workplace managers.
Perfect. Okay. So I don't see any more hands raised or questions in the chat box, but there is. I completely agree to what Dr. Sagan has mentioned in this presentation. It becomes really difficult, especially. I mean, it may not be as difficult for new generation to talk about the psychological, the mental, the physical changes that may happen or is about to happen to them. But I understand that because there isn't much awareness about menopause, it becomes really difficult, not just for women in semi urban or rural areas, but also women in corporate tier one workplaces. Because I remember my mother had a fibroid and she had a very difficult uh, um, menopausal phase. She could not communicate because we were really small back then, and she couldn't, of course she wasn't expecting us to understand, but unfortunately her my father was also not very understanding of what she was exactly going through. So when doctor was mentioning that one should seek help, what also felt is, if you have a supportive partner who is not criticizing or who's not challenging your uh, performance as a woman or as a human being in day to day life, you could always consider to take them along with you for counseling sessions so that they also can try to understand why this is happening to a woman's or a trans man's body.
Yeah.
So it becomes easy for the person living with the person who's undergoing menopause to provide that kind of a support to them. So yes, it's absolutely necessary to understand what's going through, because that's the first stage of seeking help, right? So that you know that you need help. So thank you, doctor. Thank you so much for taking out time from your busy schedule and giving us this information, enlightening us. And before we log out, I would like to inform everybody who has joined us here today that this was the second episode of the series. In the third episode, which is going to be on the 26th of April, 7 p.m., we will be addressing myths and facts about menopause. So we will be circulating a survey form requesting everybody who has any kind of doubts to submit their questions, which Dr. Meenakshi will be addressing in a similar session on next Sunday. Thank you so much for logging in. We can now log out. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Doctor. Bye bye.